I recently discovered that my spiritual teacher was not who I thought he was. In that, some friends of mine told me that in actual fact he had been abusing students. And suddenly it was like, whoa, this was a shock. So some of you are going to go, hey, why don't you name the guy? All right, fine. So my teacher was Sogyal Rinpoche, and he was my teacher for 20 years, up until I discovered that he hadn't been actually walking the talk. Now, I didn't expect him to be enlightened, but I did expect that he would not harm people. And clearly, from talking to these friends of mine and other people that I've been talking to recently, there's been quite a lot of harm done. And it's been a few months now, so I thought it'd be a good time to sort of look back and go, well, what have I learnt from all this? There's actually a huge amount that I have learned. Perhaps the most sort of obvious thing is that I was just incredibly naive. There was just so much that I didn't know, so much that I didn't look into, because, you know, I was all very comfy and cozy. I had my Lama, he came every year to Australia. It was easy to sort of pop off and go for a retreat and have a, you know, it was all good. And I never looked beyond that. I've discovered that this is actually quite, it happens quite a lot. And not just in Tibetan Buddhism, but also a lot in Zen. So yeah, naivety, incredible naivety. Over a period of time, I learnt that the Tibetan culture seems to have quite a violent streak in it. I knew it was a feudal culture, but I hadn't really thought about what feudal culture meant and how that infiltrated the religion, if you like. But in terms of the violence, there's a book come out just this year, The Life and Times of Sogyal Rinpoche, who is one of the masters of Sogyal Rinpoche. And there's a piece in this book where it describes, and this is Orjun Tobyul telling this story, how the monks, when he came to visit their monastery, it was like a tornado had sort of rolled into town, and the monks got dragged out 10 at a time, and they were given 400 to 500 lashes. Yeah, while Sogyal Rinpoche watched from the balcony. Great. Now when I read that, I was just like appalled, because in the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, which is what brought me to Tibetan Buddhism and Sogyal Rinpoche in the first place, he's portrayed to be this really, really sort of wise and compassionate being. And here he is, you know, and apparently he says, you know, no less than 400 to 500 lashes, you know, each monk. And so he's sitting there watching these guys be whipped. You know, and this is a religion where, you know, one of the core beliefs is to do no harm. So, you know, not only was my teacher harming his students, but it's there in the religion. Okay, maybe it's not the religion, but it's there in the culture. Okay, so, you know, that was just one example. Then I discovered that there's all sorts of stuff goes on in the monasteries as well. And I watched a video, and it's on YouTube, from a young Lama who was gang raped in a monastery. You know, and abuse is apparently, you know, fairly common there, or was, or I don't know. But it was just like, wow, eye-opener. Okay, so definitely not a pure religion. Looking into the Tibetan cultural aspect of this made me realize that growing up as a tulku, meaning an incarnate Lama, so you're grabbed as a 3-year-old and taken from your family because they think that you're the incarnation of some great teacher from beforehand, and you're brought up like a little god. You know, you're indulged. Well, you're also beaten. I mean, Sogyal Rinpoche said that he was beaten. Yeah, so there it is. You know, the beating's in there. He got beaten as a kid. They have this incredible, like, pressure on them, I realised, to you know, manifest. And so how easy is it then to think of yourself as enlightened, even if you're not, you know, and start acting like you're a crazy wisdom master. I also learned that, you know, the true crazy wisdom is not kind of hitting people all the time and yelling at them all the time. It's actually used incredibly rarely on people who are, you know, basically almost there. And it's like one thing, You know, you do one thing and it shifts something in them. It's not this constant, stuff. So that made me realise there's an incredible lack of education amongst the people at the head of Rigpa management, the ones who, are watching this. They're being abused for years and years and years, and they don't see anything wrong with it because they think that their teacher's a crazy wisdom master, but they haven't actually done a lot of research, because it didn't take a lot of research on my part to discover that there's nothing consistent about true crazy wisdom. I learned a lot. I also learned that this whole thing about having one teacher, it's a load of crap. And other lamas say, no, you should have more than one teacher. So this kind of adoration that we were expected to have was not actually, that's actually not normal. I learned a lot about the dynamics of abuse. I'd studied a little bit about abuse just because I've always had this interest in stopping bullying. It's just something that's always motivated me. And as a teacher, when I've seen it, I've always done something about it as much as possible. But here I looked into, really the domestic abuse kind of covered it very much, because most of the abuse was, the alleged abuse, happened in his household, and people were very close to him. National level people when they're doing retreats and stuff, and they're close to him. And the dynamics was very much similar to the dynamics in an abusive family. So in fact, the whole of Rigpa is to some degrees like an abusive family, right down to the denial of people that there's anything wrong. So I learnt about projections. I'd already known a bit about projections and sort of tried to avoid them myself. Projecting father figure on to a lama. One thing I hadn't really thought about was how, as Westerners, we just tend to sort of project saviour onto the teacher, onto Tibetan lamas too. It's like, oh, we've got a teacher, we've got a spiritual teacher, and they're going to save us, and so there's that tendency, which already makes you kind of over-rely on them a bit. And I realised how we had kind of been like spoon-fed so much that even if the aim of it was, genuine generosity, which, I'm sure it was, we became quite dependent on, getting our hit of daily videos. And whereas, other lamas say, well, the idea of these teachings is you get some teachings and you go away and practice it. You don't just keep getting teachings all the time. Whereas in Rigpa is very much, more teachings. It was almost like we were encouraged to sort of grasp after them. And the reward for our devotion was getting the deeper teachings. I learned about trauma bonding. Because one of the first things you ask one of the first things I asked when my friend told me the depth of the issue, I said, why did you stay so long? And she gave me a link to something called trauma bonding, an article on trauma bonding. And, it's basically the kind of bonding that makes people who are kidnapped fall in love with their kidnapper. It's got to do with someone who they're really nasty to you one day, and then they love bomb you the next day. And so you start to kind of live for the good bits. It creates this bond between you. You become quite dependent on this person to give you some positive feedback, so you feel good. And I think the really unfortunate thing about that is that there's still a lot of people in Rigpa who have been treated really badly by the teacher and are still under the sway of trauma bonding, probably. My looking into it certainly indicates that would be the case up until the point at which they realise that the behaviour that they've been subjected to is not normal, not acceptable, and frankly, downright abusive. So, I've also learnt about the marks of a cult and was terribly shocked to see just how much Rigpa behaves like a cult, and are behaving more and more like a cult. It's very sad. Anyway, so I learned about that. But I mean, this is just like a whole nother vlog on that. I think perhaps the most shocking thing is the incredible clinging that people have to their beliefs. I always knew that, beliefs were an obstacle to seeing reality. And, and the Buddha says we shouldn't cling to any beliefs. I mean, it's kind of obvious because as a Buddhist, you're supposed to be trying to see the nature of reality. That's the whole point. That's what enlightenment is being totally in not being separate to reality in any way at all. And your concepts always stop you from seeing clearly. They're cognitive obscurations, right? Beliefs are cognitive obscurations. And some of them are very subtle. Some of them are really, really obvious. And what I discovered was that, there's a lot of people who didn't want to actually examine their beliefs. And it's kind of frightening for ego to examine beliefs that you've held for a long time. And so rather than do that, they cling more tightly to those beliefs and just ignore anything that actually kind of suggests that there might be a problem with those beliefs. So that's a really good learning. And as I say, it's something that I knew, but it just gave me an illustration of what happens when you cling to your beliefs. So when I saw that for me made me more determined to drop my concepts around the issue and try to see the situation from a much wider perspective, which I did, have done, still are exploring all the avenues, and so I learned a lot from that. But the most important thing that I learned is to rely on my own wisdom nature. And this is actually what we were supposed to be being taught all along. The whole point of Dzogchen is to turn your mind into your own wisdom mind. That's what we were told, but in practice, we were actually spending an awful lot of time trying to prove that we were devoted enough to get the next lot of awesome high teachings. And this, we'd become there's this dependency there on the teacher, which is actually not helpful, And when I sort of looked at it and I saw how I had become, I wouldn't say dependent myself, but that this was a form of laziness. I'd sort of get up and, I can't be bothered meditating today, I'll just listen to the teaching. It becomes a way to sort of bypass actually practicing. When everything's falling down around you and you don't know what to believe anymore, the first thing you learn as a Buddhist is to take refuge. And the ultimate refuge is in the nature of your mind. So, I just sit there and turn my mind in. And from that clear space, that clear mind state, that union of emptiness and clarity, I knew what I had to do. I knew everything was clear. Yeah, when you just can, when you drop the whole lot, everything that you know about practice, all your concepts about practice, it's like you start fresh and it's wonderful. It no longer has the same definition. I just dropped all of that and found that the practice I was doing became so much more genuine, so much more real, had so much more depth and meaning, and it was like, yes, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Turning our minds into ourselves and recognizing our own wisdom. And my wisdom said this behavior was wrong. And a lot of other people's wisdom said it's wrong too. And of course the issue when you say that, rely on your own wisdom, because some people say, you rely on your own wisdom, you're likely to go off, you don't know you're following ego, you're not following your wisdom mind, how do you know the difference? Well, the way you know the difference is you just drop all your shit, You drop the clinging to any agendas, any desires, any beliefs. You just drop it all, and then what's left is your knowing. What's left is your awareness, and out of that is the wisdom. And that's how you know that it's wisdom, because it's not enmeshed in emotion and desires, and attachments and aversions and ignorance, basically. So on a personal level, I've had a real slap in the face, in terms of, hey, girl, you're supposed to be looking in. You're not supposed to be chasing out after lamas. Sure, have some teachings, but not this, that's exactly not what Dharma is about. It's about cutting our grasping and looking to somebody else all the time, looking outside to somebody else, to what somebody else is going to tell us next. That is just not it. That's the complete opposite of not it. So, on a personal level, I learned, let all that go, and it's brilliant. Such freedom, such inspiration in that letting go of all of it. I highly recommend it. Those of you who are still clinging, honestly, just let it all go, And once you've let it go, what's valuable in it then starts to, rise out of your own wisdom. You see what's valuable, and you see quite clearly what is actually only really a kind of an overlay, if you like, a kind of cultural overlay. Trust whatever comes out of our own wisdom. Yeah. So that's it. That's what I've learned. So if you found my ramblings helpful at all and you'd like to see more of them, make sure you don't miss my upcoming vlogs, then please just press the subscribe button, which is going to appear somewhere, and click the bell icon thingy if you want to get notifications of when a new video is up. And if you want to really, really help to foster the kind of thing that I'm doing, which is, I'm about sharing the spiritual path and helping other people, kind of hopefully providing a space where insight can arise in you guys. So you could become a patron, maybe, if you like. That would be great. See you next time. Bye.